I'm just wrapping up my morning chores and I'm trying to get a game plan together for what exactly I'm going to do with the horses today. As soon as I'm cleared to ride, I'm going to be working with Prim and Stewie to get them going under saddle. The small arena is getting pretty dry. There's just a little bit of ice around the edges. But it does seem like Ziggy is finding every single pile of poop.
Oh my gosh.
The outdoor runs attached to all the horses' stalls do still have quite a bit of ice underneath the buildup of hay from this winter. Unfortunately, I will have to wait until these are completely dry, otherwise I will get the skid steer stuck back here. I did catch him up yesterday and give him a full grooming session, and I did trim his feet, so today he's a little bit apprehensive about getting caught again.
Nigel.
His little tent has a little bit of frozen turds still left in it, and hopefully I'll be able to get all of the rest of those out either today or tomorrow. This last week we have had some really warm days, but it is going to get chillier over the next week or so.
Tiny. Come here. Whoa. Tiny. Psst, psst. Tiny. Whoa.
With a lot of the ground squirrels waking up and mice scurrying around in the barn, Tiny is on full alert today. She has been following me around all morning just to make sure I can see that there's ground squirrels everywhere. Frisco Bill has been getting a little bit extra stiff lately, so I open his gate in the morning, and if he wants to go out and say hello to Scarlett, I just let him wander around for a few minutes.
Scarlett. Prim. Hey, girl. Prim.
I really like to start the spring off with all of the horses doing some work in the round pen just to get them back into the swing of things.
Girly.
With my neck still on the mend, I do not need these horses pulling me around when they're extra fresh. I know the big round pen has quite a bit of ice left to melt before it's usable, so this morning I'm going to go out and see if the smaller round pen in the big arena is going to be ready anytime soon. I got a little bit distracted. I noticed that there were two really big mounds out here, and I'm 99% sure that these are from the badger that lives out here. I can see that there's been quite a bit of foot traffic between these two holes. The ground squirrels make holes that are a little bit smaller than my fist, and this one I could easily step right in and snap a leg off. There are a lot of ground squirrels in this area, and I'm sure this guy is still digging underground trying to have a few little snacks before they pop their heads out for the season. It doesn't really bother me when I see them out here. This is the neighbor's property, so the horses never go over here.
No, Tiny. Here, go back to the barn. Come on. Oh, this way. Come on.
Tiny usually doesn't venture out onto the snow by herself just because we do have a lot of big birds out here. I can tell though she's getting a little bit anxious to go hunting for ground squirrels.
Not full, buddy.
A lot of people do poison these little guys, but I don't bother with it. I just make sure all of the holes are filled in the horse pasture. Tiny and Huckleberry both hunt them, so they put a big dent in the population, and then we do have a lot of birds of prey out here that you can see swooping down to snatch them up. I have definitely noticed over the last couple of years that there are a ton of bald eagles that come just to hunt over in this area because there is a plethora of ground squirrels in the spring. Before I turn the horses back out on the pasture for the season, I will go through and thoroughly check the pasture for ground squirrel holes. Most of them are smaller than a horse's foot, but there is the possibility that they could trip on them, so I make sure to get those all taken care of before the horses are out. I was hoping that it would be a little bit more sunny today because Ziggy definitely needs a bath, but I think it's going to be too overcast for him to get washed today. These boys have had their breakfast in their other dry lot for about an hour, so I think they maybe are a little bit confused about where they're getting fed today. It's been really convenient to feed them in the arena while my neck has been hurt, but since I can drive the gator on the snow now, they need to get fed back in the regular dry lot. Hopefully I can coax them back over there without too much trouble. Once these boys finally realized that their breakfast was over in the normal spot, they were happy to start munching away. I was hoping the round pen would be mostly thawed out by now, but there's 3 to 4 inches of ice in some places, so I'm just going to put a little bit of ice melt out here and hopefully that will speed up the process. I didn't really notice until I went back through the video, but Tiny pretty much followed me around all day long. I haven't seen her actually catch any ground squirrels yet, but there have been a few days where she is awfully round. Tiny is spayed, so there's no possibility that she will ever have kittens. It's really nice to see that there are a few really dry spots out here in the arena already. I noticed today that the harrow is finally out of the snow, so I can start dragging this relatively soon. I'm hopefully optimistic that by this evening the ice in here will be thin enough that if Prim walks on it, it'll just break up and I can start in on her training. The dry spot outside of the round pen is definitely large enough for me to do some basic training with her, but Prim can get very excited and I just don't want to risk her pulling my neck out of position. I know by this afternoon all this little bit of surface ice is going to be melted. Hopefully it won't get too wet. When this arena was put in, I don't think they put down a proper base because it doesn't drain quite right and the footing can get rather deep very quickly when the ground is saturated. Since it's not warm enough to give Ziggy a bath every day, I have been bringing him and Scarlett in at night and vacuuming them off. You can kind of see how far I was able to get yesterday. Sometimes he's too wet by the time I get to him in the evening and the vacuum cannot suck up wet material, so every day when I vacuum these guys, they pretty much just go back out here and roll again. In the morning, I do like to use this curry rake on them. It's pretty old. I've had this for a very long time, so the teeth are not as spiky as a brand new one. I bought a new one for Pearl and I was really surprised to feel how sharp the little teeth actually were. I do have a few horses that are too sensitive to use one of these if it is not dulled down by time. Scarlett has really matured a lot over the winter. I think she is in the perfect stage in her training to start being hauled out to different barns in the area. It is a really important part of a young horse's training to get out and see the world, even if they're not going to be ridden. A lot of the horses that aren't started under saddle, like Stewie and Prim, have been hauled extensively. Last summer was kind of an odd year. I didn't haul out hardly at all. Last year I spent a lot of my free time with Skeletor's rehab, so this year I should have a lot more time. Poor Scarlett did get a little bit startled by her own tail here. She has gotten a lot less jumpy, but every once in a while something will surprise her. She has gotten extremely good at quieting her own mind when scary things like that do happen. Ziggy, on the other hand, at this point has a few habits that are a little bit worse than Scarlett's. Even though I've been trying really hard to keep this guy clean, he pretty much saturates himself every single day in the most disgusting slop pit he can find. I had a comment on one of my previous videos that it looked like Scarlett was searching for treats. I actually haven't given Scarlett any kind of treats in like 2 months. Most of the time when I'm using treats in my training, it's to improve their association with a task. Scarlett had a lot of fear about being haltered and the halter touching her face, and now I can walk right up to her and put her halter on like a completely normal horse. The treats are used more for a positive association as opposed to positive reinforcement. There's a little bit of a difference. Now that Scarlett is not scared about getting haltered, she does not need treats any longer. This dry spot in the smaller arena is perfect for laying down and rolling in, but as you can see over here, there is a Ziggy-sized plop of hair from where he was laying down and rolling last night or this morning. He is still a little bit scared of the tarp, so I'm just going to put it down and hopefully he'll find a different spot to roll this afternoon. Something really funny that I saw Scarlett do the other day is Ziggy would not leave her alone while she was eating her dinner, so she went across the arena, picked up this tarp, and put it in between Ziggy and her dinner. I've never seen a horse use a tarp in this manner, and it was kind of interesting to see Scarlett troubleshoot how she could eat her dinner without being bothered. I really would like to get this girl out and about this spring. Maybe we'll go to some open horse shows and just show in the halter class. Since Scarlett is not registered in any association, it will be a little bit tricky to find any shows where I can take her where they do have a class for grade horses that is not riding. One thing I've been doing just to get Scarlett a little bit more ready for me to be on top of her is doing a few little stretches every morning. I am running a little bit behind schedule today. I want to make sure I get to my physical therapy appointment on time, so it looks like I better head out. Tiny made sure to follow me over to Pearl's pen to supervise me filling up her water trough. I almost think that Tiny was expecting me to help her on the mouse hunt this morning. She was getting progressively more frisky the longer it took me to do chores.
Oh, careful. Tiny. Tiny. What have you been doing all day, girl?
It took me a little bit longer in town today than I had expected, so when I got back to the barn in the evening, it was very close to dinner time for the horses. Tiny, of course, was pretty upset that I didn't show up at the normal time.
Oh.
When I came in, it looked like the round pen was not really thawed at all, so this afternoon I'm going to do some cleanup. It looks like Ziggy could definitely use it.
Oh, you're disgusting. Your hair is green, Zig.
Thankfully, Ziggy is 98% dry, so I will be able to continue his vacuum training this evening. He's not going to like it, but it's better than me getting covered in turd particles. The last couple times I've vacuumed Ziggy, we've been working really hard on getting him used to the hose because I think that's the main thing that he's scared of. Some horses really have trouble with things that look like snakes, and this definitely makes a pretty serious sound as well as looking like one. Ziggy has gotten tons better, but every once in a while he'll try to find an escape route. Ziggy has gotten a lot better. I can now use both of the motors when I'm vacuuming him, so it does a pretty good job of getting all of the big chunks off of him. As you can see, he still does have quite a bit of loose hair on him, and his mane is still pretty green. This is about the best that I can do at this point in time. Ziggy and Scarlett have both been staying inside during the evening for their main dinner, and then I turn them back out if the weather is going to be nice. I think you guys are going to be blown away by how good Scarlett is around this vacuum. Sometimes it can get very discouraging when you're working with a fearful horse like Scarlett. Wild horses tend to have a much lower fear threshold overall, but some of them can be quite docile right out of holding. Recently, I've been really interested in the journey that Alyssa from Mountain Built has been going on with her Mustang. She really did her homework when it came to checking out all of the horses and picking one that was really outgoing and very trainable. If you guys haven't already seen their channel, I would definitely pop over there and check them out. Since I am feeling so much better, I am starting to make a few plans for the summer. I'm trying to plan one fun trip every month. I've got my eyeballs on a few in-person adoptions at different BLM facilities. I'm not sure if they're doing any auctions like the one I went to last year. I do have some plans for Ziggy, but they are kind of contingent on whether or not I'm going to be riding relatively soon. I'm signed up for one really fun clinic, and then I'm hoping to take maybe Stewie or Scarlett to a Liberty clinic this summer if I can find one that works with my schedule. Since I'm probably not going to be riding Scarlett anytime soon, I think that would be just a super fun thing for her to learn and for me to get a better handle on. I don't specifically train my horses to do things at Liberty, but a lot of times it just kind of ends up happening. I was invited on a fairly intense pack trip that I don't think I'm going to be able to go on. It is very early in the season, and I just don't have a horse that could handle the amount of miles that we are planning on covering. I might still go on a borrowed horse, but it is hard to get away for 4 or 5 days and leave the horses here with my sitter. With all of the spring grass coming up, it is kind of a tricky time because the horses do need to be rotated fairly often, and I just really should be around for that part of the introduction to pasture. I'm still not sure who is going to go out with Scarlett and Ziggy. I had thought maybe Prim and Frisco Bill. The last couple of days, I've noticed that Pearl has been trotting around her round pen a lot more, so there's a possibility that she could be a good third wheel for these two. This will be Prim's second time using the vacuum. She doesn't really ever get very dirty. She's a pretty clean horse, even though she does have the opportunity to roll in mud out in her run. She isn't 100% comfortable with the hose yet, and it looks like today she does have a ton of hair just coming out, so it's easier for me to just brush her. While Frisco Bill loves this girl, she does need to get out and see the world a little bit more. I've hauled her a bunch of times here and there, but every time she goes with Frisco, so she really needs to learn how to be confident on her own or with some different friends. I've been turning Prim and Frisco out in the smaller arena while Ziggy and Scarlett eat their dinner. For some reason, Frisco did not want to come out of his stall today, so I just left his door open, and if he decides to come out and stretch his legs, that's fine. Or he can just hang out in his stall and eat his dinner. Since I'm not going to be able to use the round pen today, I decided to go ahead and catch up these 3 boys and give them a good brushing. These 3 don't look too terrible, but it'll be nice to get some of the loose hair off of them. Of these 3 boys, Goose is probably the most tricky to catch. As soon as he saw me coming with the halter, he hightailed it out of here. With his teeny tiny little horse brain, he decided the best course of action would be to go inside the round pen, where I pretty easily was able to capture both him and Big Gus. This happy accident will make it much easier for me to spend some quality time with each of these boys. I'll probably have to wait quite a while before I get back into serious work with Goose and Studman. They're both just a little bit too volatile for me to work when I'm trying to heal my neck. Big Gus, on the other hand, is very trustworthy. He is pretty slow going when you ride him, and he is quite lazy, in fact. So he will probably be one of the first horses I end up riding when I'm cleared to do so. After Studman realized he was the only one that was out in the big arena, he let me catch him easy peasy. The other 2 boys were still a little bit on the sassy side, and without Studman around to referee them, they went to pestering each other. For the spring, I had thought about maybe putting Big Gus back in with the other boys, and then Studman and Goose could go in the barn. It would be nice to spend some more quality time with Studman and Goose this spring. Studman has always been relatively friendly, but probably over the last 6 months or so, he's really started to calm down mentally. I decided just to have him walk 1 or 2 circles around me. This has been really hard for him in the past, so it's nice to just do it a few times and get him settled. He does get really excited when I ask him to do anything, and I think that has to do with his previous handling. Even though it doesn't really look like much, this low-key kind of brushing and then just doing a tiny bit of work can really help these fractious-minded horses. After I was done with Studman, it was time for Goose to come out and play. Since Goose is typically a very worried kind of horse, he generally tries to do everything exactly right. I think Goose is probably shedding enough that maybe I could use a different tool on him. It is so much more satisfying when you can get all of this winter hair out in one grooming session. Typically, however, that is not how it usually works. While Goose is really good about doing tasks on the ground, he still has a lot of trouble just standing still and being calm. He is the same age as Pete, and they do have a lot of the same problems. I've ridden both of them a handful of times, but it is really important to me that they're able to kind of calm their minds before we do any more hard under saddle work. Both Goose and Pete can be very volatile when they get scared, so it's fine to spend some extra time with these guys on the ground before we really get into it with their under saddle training. It looks like Frisco came out and he found himself some alfalfa leaves to munch on. Prim is a little bit upset about it, but that's okay. She'll eventually get over it. I spent a few more minutes grooming Goose, making sure to get out all of the hair that I could today.
What are you doing?
I noticed that Tiny was precariously perched on the edge of the round pen. She must be surveying the ground to see where all of the ground squirrel holes are. It made me a little bit nervous to see her up there, but it looks like she's going to be just fine.
That's a good boy.
It was kind of surprising. Typically, Goose runs away as soon as I take his halter off, but for some reason today he wanted to stay and investigate me a little bit more. I don't have any treats in my pockets or anything. He is just investigating me because he wants to. At this point, he is probably actually a bit less outgoing than Pete, so it was nice to have him want to spend some more time with me today. Last on my list is Gus. While Gus is a very trustworthy horse, I don't know that he actually enjoys hanging out with me. He tolerates me and does his best to do everything I ask of him. Sometimes he even overdoes it, and today he was really thinking that I wanted him to lope around in a little circle.
What are you doing? You're going that way.
Of course, it was probably a little bit more tricky for him with the other two horses loose. It's kind of funny, for as lazy as Gus is under saddle, he gets pretty jazzed up when he is on a lunge line.
Whoa.
After working a few horses in this little spot, the footing was getting a little bit on the slippery side.
Whoa, you okay, buddy?
I think there's just too much water saturating it and it is getting really deep, so I'm going to just stop right there and continue on with his grooming session for the day. Gus is one of the last horses to shed his hair coat. Typically, he doesn't do it until he is out on pasture. I'm not really sure why that is. I think it has something to do with the amount of vitamin E that he needs to start shedding out. I've tried supplementing him, but it doesn't really do anything until he is actually out on real grass.
Come on, Jenny. Hey, stud man. Good boy.
These boys seemed to calm down pretty quickly after they were all groomed and ready for dinner. Tiny came by to show off her balancing skills. She is definitely on high alert and extra sassy this evening. Typically, Tiny and Huckleberry like to hunt the ground squirrels at the same time, but it is just too sloppy for me to bring Huckleberry over here. I probably won't bring him over here consistently until I have all of the dry lots scraped out and drained. These boys needed a little bit of raking done to their poop streams. But after I was done with that, I decided that I might as well go ahead and groom up these boys as well. Typically, all of these boys will let me brush them without catching them, even Pete these days. For some reason tonight, however, Whiplash was making sure that none of the other horses had an opportunity to get brushed. He kept reaching around because he wanted extra scratches on his face. He is definitely shedding, and it, I'm sure, is a bit itchy for him. It was darn near impossible for me to get him brushed this evening because every time I got back to his body, he would just reach around and want me to scratch his face. As I was working on Whiplash, Stewie and Pete came over to investigate. It's been super fun to see Pete kind of come out of his shell a little bit more this winter. Unfortunately, tonight he decided that he just did not want to get brushed. Without their free choice bale to keep them
Stewie.
busy, these boys have been getting into more and more trouble every single day. I tried very hard to get Stewie brushed down, but Whiplash was wanting no part of any of the other horses getting attention.
Hey, hey, Whip.
As soon as all of the manure is taken out of the small arena, I can start haltering these guys and bringing them in to get brushed every day. It'll be really nice to get them back in a routine, and it'll be good preparation for them to all be respectable when the dentist comes.
Oh, Stewie. Happening, bud.
Stewie had one big patch of hair that really let loose while I was currying him. Hopefully the rest of them will do the same pretty soon. Pete seemed like he was interested in getting brushed, but the other horses made it pretty impossible for him to get any quality time. This time of year, I do wish that I had a little bit bigger barn so I could bring everybody in and put them in their own stalls and then work them individually. Being able to brush them all out in the pasture is a real time saver, especially this time of year when they're getting this disgusting every single day. But for a horse like Pete, who likes attention but not around the other horses, it would definitely be a benefit if I could get him separated. Whiplash was really feeling a bit needy today. Even when I went down to check on the water, he followed me and then followed me back as I was heading out of their pen. In typical Gus fashion, he got really upset when the brushing was over.
Two boys.
I did the best that I could, but he was still pretty wet, so I'm gonna have to get him brushed again tomorrow.
Frisco Bill.
Frisco finally found his way out next to Prim, and she eventually settled down.
Hey, girl.
It is supposed to be raining a little bit tonight, so I think I'm gonna leave Scarlett and Ziggy inside. After I'm done with chores for the evening, I'll also go ahead and get Pearl in for the night. Hopefully she won't get too upset about it, but it is supposed to be a little bit too cold for her to stand outside tonight if it is raining. I'm gonna let Frisco Bill walk around a little bit more while I divvy up the hay for the evening to all of the horses outside.
Oh, Gus. Frisco Bill. Come on, Prim. Come on, Prim.
Since Frisco Bill doesn't go anywhere without Prim, it is pretty easy to catch him up in the evening. While he really loves Prim, he also really loves dinner, so I am not worried at all about him running off. All of his favorite things are inside the barn. Even though my plans for the day changed since this morning, it felt really good to get out and handle a bunch of the horses today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.